Hello, everybody. Welcome to first of MHTV for 2022. And I think any of us thought that that's ever something we'd be saying. We were supposed to set up, if you remember back in the day, just to cover a little bit of disruption over a summer period when we had all become a bit distant from each other and things had got a bit just disparate and people going online. And if you remember, it was when conferences and meetings were getting cancelled. So we thought we'll put together just a few conversations online to tide us over. And we're still here, bizarrely, which is lovely for us. And it gives us a chance to look back. So what this episode is about is looking back over the last year's worth of work and really starting to have a think about what worked, what you really enjoyed. We really want to hear from you. So we're going to obviously go to the rest of the team to introduce themselves in just one second. But don't forget, you guys, we really want to hear from you as well. So can I come to Dave first to say how people can join in tonight and actually maybe comment on some of the episodes that they've enjoyed or anything they'd like in the future? Dave?
Hi, Nicky. Yeah, thanks. So as always, anyone watching along, a couple of options for joining in. The first one is on Facebook Live. So obviously just watching the live feed, if you want to pop any comments or questions or thoughts in the live feed chat, that's great. And then on Twitter, all you need to do is include the hashtag MHTV and we'll be looking out for that. And obviously we'll be able to bring in any comments or thoughts into tonight's episode.
Okay, let's go to Vanessa. Vanessa, obviously, can you introduce yourself, even though everyone knows who you are, and then maybe say what episode really stood out for you last year?
Yeah, hi everyone. Happy New Year as well, first of all. Hope everyone's had a great Christmas. I know it's not a great time at the moment and there's lots of people off with COVID and isolating and things like that. So if you're bored tonight, then, join us and have a conversation about what we've been up to for the last year. I mean, when Nicky said just then my favourite episode, it's really hard for me to say. It's also really hard for me to kind of define what was last year and what was the year before, because I feel like it's all just blended in together as one. But I think if I was to, it would be more of a theme than an episode. I think for me, I've really enjoyed the conversations about empathy, about connection, about how we use the arts and sort of conversations about green issues and also about how, nurses support each other as well. I think that's been really important and they're the ones that I've probably connected with most. But I think that's also because, I'm passionate about nursing being an art as well as a science. So I'm always more drawn to conversations about those things as well. How about you, Nicky?
Well, I have to agree. I've really loved the fact that we've been able to talk about mental health issues very much as they touch life, really. So again, that understanding of things around sort of green health and sustainability, around nurses being political when they want to be, and being able to take activist roles as well and to feel powerful in that, because I think a lot of what's happening at the minute is squashing people. So I was really impressed as well by the Nurse Lifeline crew actually standing up and doing something, and the kind of activists that we saw on the Green Health and podcast, but also people on an individual level. So I really loved Jawdat Logba talking about her experience of sickle cell in such a positive and engaging way, and actually really sharing her experiences in a way I think that help us to think about health and illness in a much more kind of human way rather than just biomedical. So I found that really exciting. I guess, Dave, what was yours?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because obviously in prep for these kind of episodes, you kind of look back on all the episodes that you've done over the year. And it's kind of, you kind of think every week the ones that you do, that'll be one that I'll remember and I'll remember. But then when you read them one after another, it really kind of hits home what a huge amount of different topics we covered last year. I think one of the ones that came out for me were kind of the single guest episodes that we did, where we were able to kind of dive down into the minds of the people that were involved in those. And just thinking about, ones like the one we did with Mark Radford. He's just been awarded a CBE in the recent Queen's Honours, New Year's Honours list. And it's funny because you kind of remember why we were talking about why we invited him onto that episode. And at that point, it was because, last year we had the kind of the major winter wave of COVID. and there was talk about getting student nurses into, kind of away from placement, more into kind of day-to-day nursing, and all the kind of the pitfalls that might come from that, the problems that might come from it, some of the advantages that might come from it. And it's kind of, it's funny in a way that you kind of think that we've had 12 months since then. So much has happened, so much has changed. The world is kind of in a very different place, although in some ways in a very similar place. And I suppose, kind of MHTV for me has been kind of something that's marked that time, and it's kind of counted down those days. I think as well, like I say, some great episodes, single person episodes. We had Andrea Sutcliffe on from the NMC. We had Natasha Devon on, who it's been great to see, get a much higher public profile over the last year. Now she's a regular presenter on LBC Radio. Really pleased for her. And I suppose to look at the episode that I probably enjoyed the most was with Professor Dame Elizabeth Anyonwu, who was on just 2 months ago. But I always really enjoy listening to Elizabeth talk. It's one of those where you kind of feel like as long as you've got a brew and the house is warm, you can put your feet up and you can just listen to a talk for hour and hour about such a kind of a massively varied and kind of insightful career. And that's one of the things that I kind of love about nursing as well, that, if you kind of spoke to a kid about nursing, they maybe would have a very kind of individual view of, oh, well, it's someone that works on a ward in a hospital looking after people that have physical illness. But actually, I think Elizabeth sort of typifies really nicely the kind of huge variety, the huge number of doors that nursing can open, and the huge number of doors that nurses can help to open, not just in this country, but around the world. And I think, her episode really kind of reminded me of that yet again. So, some great episodes for people to watch on YouTube or Facebook or listen to on our podcast.
I think we need to retweet some of those back out again as well. I think you're also useful to see what kind of had the most watches. Is it possible that we could have a quick talk over which ones were most viewed? Because I know all the platforms have different amounts, but but maybe start with number 3 in that true kind of radio DJ style. 3, 2, 1. So what was the third most?
Yeah, so like you say, Nicky, looking in advance this episode, the kind of the top 3, top 5, top 1. If we're thinking about our YouTube channel, then obviously those episodes aren't on there live. They're recorded on Facebook, and we upload them onto it. The third most popular on YouTube this year was episode 61. And for those that can't remember what episode 61 was, that was on health and sustainability. Yeah, I know, Nicky. You kind of said in prep for this that was one of a real favourite of your episodes. Yeah. So can you kind of remember any highlights from it?
I think what I really like about it is really recognising the part that nurses play in terms of planetary health as well as personal health, because nobody is going to thrive in a social situation that's not healthy and that doesn't support human life. So we can do all this kind of work around, biomedically looking at things. But if someone is in unsafe housing, if they are in a situation where they're experiencing a lot of smoke, poor air quality, all the tablets in the world aren't going to fix that. And so there's something around, understanding kind of the human condition of nursing. And that's nurses' job, I think, be able to kind of promote people to live as well as possible. And that's from a cellular level and below, but also I think on a much more societal level. And what I really liked about that particular episode is it takes all the things that nurses are so good at, which is looking at a problem everyone else is like, and maybe runs away from, and going, right, let's break it down, let's get practical. What do we need to do about this ethically, morally, practically, philosophically? How can we align up what's the right thing to do with what's the most expedient and most sensible thing to do? A kind of practical problem solving, and that taking not just a financial view of something, but a well-being view of something in its kind of richest and most holistic sense. That's what I really enjoyed about that episode. And it was full of lots of different people's descriptions of, I saw this, it wasn't right, so I fixed it, or I tried to start fixing it. And it was full as well, not of just people like, oh, magically solving problems, but coming together, getting stuck, checking back with other people, then joining up with nurses from other countries as well to look at problems. And I thought that was really, I know it's a really beautiful thing to see in a world where problems seem to be just insurmountable. I mean, they're coming 1, 2, 3 all the time, and actually seeing people breaking stuff down and taking responsibility on a personal level, but also connecting up on a community level with other nurses and actually reaching, across kind of country boundaries. I loved seeing that. I thought it was great. Mm-hmm. That's what I thought.
Yeah, I agree. I think what I loved about the sustainability argument was the acknowledgement of the inequality within sustainability, because, a lot of sustainability is around, it assumes it's around buying middle class products that, a lot of poorer people can't afford in order to be sustainable. And I think the acknowledgement that there is, there is that inequality within the sort of sustainability agenda, but also, as you say, how nurses are great problem solvers, and how nurses will use resources like social media to connect with each other and to generate a social movement and things that don't cost any money to try and kind of solve problems together. And whether that's about sustainability or any issue, I think it demonstrates nursing at its best, really.
Yeah, I do. So what was the next one?
Well, just before you go on, I think as well, it kind of links in with quite a few of the other episodes that we had last year as well, didn't it? So we had quite a few that looked at the environment, and I think one of them tied up really nicely with some of the articles in a mental health nursing journal from last year, and then obviously we had an episode more recently where we travelled over to Australia and talked about tackling waste from the ocean. So that was really nice as well. But yes, so on our second most popular YouTube episode of last year, it was episode 53, and that was with Emma Wadey and guests talking about.
I thought you were just going to leave the number there.
the Professional Nurse Advocate Programme. And that, was a programme that really kind of found its feet last year. From growing from something really, really small into something that now covers lots of healthcare organisations, and not only mental health nursing, but across, it kind of originally started with critical care, intensive care nurses, just because of the huge pressure that we know that they were under and faced and still face with COVID-19. So it was, something very much of its time that has developed very well over, the last year. And I think as well, real credit to Emma for the amazing work that she did on that programme. And that's someone else that, watching last year be a really strong advocate for mental health nursing. And when you kind of think, me, someone that's kind of supported our mental health nurse members in Unite, one of the oft criticisms is the inability for mental health nurses to get a seat at the table or to get their voices heard. And I think, Emma's done an amazing job at really kind of pushing that to the kind of the next level, and sad for her that she was kind of recruited just before kind of COVID sort of was kicking off. Something else that I always feel really sad for her about was the way that she got, recruited onto the WHO international sort of like, there's an international group looking at mental health. She managed to get onto that the time when no travel was allowed, and she had to do it all from a bedroom.
Very unfair.
I know. I think that's a bit gutting. Looking at colleagues that missed out on some international travel. At the start of COVID, when we were hoping to get to Horatio conference. We kind of feel that pain as well, don't we? Not just the sort of the professional pain, but also the ability to travel pain. So I think Emma's done an amazing job in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, definitely. I think there is something said as well about having nurse leaders who you can be really sort of proud to get behind as well, and she's definitely one for me. that I would think that of. And it's an oft complaint, isn't it? Like nobody wants to bite that bullet because it is a hard job, particularly at the moment. But she's doing a great job doing that. Really good. And it's nice to have people to be proud of, isn't it? Can't just keep looking at Florence Nightingale forever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that was an interesting one.
Yeah, and good to see a female nurse leader as well, and a female nurse leader that can lead like a female rather than like a male, as we often find within leadership. So I think, for me, Emma's values and the way she leads is positive. And I think, it links into the whole thing about social media and making these conversations accessible, having Emma on, having Andrea Sutcliffe on, people, so that the nursing community can join in these conversations. And I think for me that shifted with COVID, because prior to COVID I was always passionate about, nurses can get on social media and you can talk to anybody and you can have conversations and you can change things as a community. Whereas now it's about nurses are isolated, where can we connect with each other? And, it's kind of slightly shifted. It's the same thing, but there's that kind of shift that there's still an online space that you can come on and connect with people and have those conversations.
Yeah.
And I think on that point, Vanessa, just one of the things that jumped into my head is the bit about the lack of nurse representation on the COVID briefings. We've seen kind of Boris Johnson flanked often by, medics, but not by nurses. Yeah, and that then reminds me of when Ruth May, Chief Nursing Officer in England, was last on the briefings. She had the temerity to sort of criticise behaviours, which then obviously, some people believe that's why she wasn't invited back on. And go on, what was that, Nicky?
I believe that.
Yeah. And I think again, it's quite a shame really that that nurses haven't seen that, or people that don't know about nursing haven't sort of had the opportunity to say that. And especially when we see that nurses have played such a huge part in the response to COVID, but then haven't been kind of seen at that top table, and it's very, very welcome, very valuable, like Chris Whitty and JVT's been, knighted in the New Year's honour as well, but, that kind of lack of nurse representation at that level seemed very unfortunate.
Very unfortunate.
And that is represented in the honours list, isn't it? The lack of nurses, and certainly that's been commented on in social media as well.
Yeah. I think we have a call out as well for Laura Serrant, Professor Serrant, who did definitely give it both barrels when she had the opportunity to speak. So congratulations. It was lovely to see her in action. I really enjoyed it. And we've taken a clip of that. I think it was her on Question Time. And we use it as a part of our nurse communication course, which is so great, I think, for all those reasons, the reasons you've just said, but also because nurses need to be able to say no sometimes. Sometimes you being unpopular is your job, and you've got to say stuff that people don't necessarily want to hear. And I'm sad that we haven't had so many nurses in Spotlight, but I'm really proud of the ones that did get up and say no when something was wrong, because that's a really important part of a nurse's job, isn't it? To be able to keep people safe and say what needs to be said. So I kind of enjoyed it, but, I'd like to hear more of it. But, truth did hurt, as I think people have found out. But we'll see, because I think there's a long history, isn't there, of people who are motivated by their personal beliefs and by their professional opinions being heard unfavourably, shall we say. I mean, you just have to go back to Professor Nutt, don't you, with everyone saying, what do you think about drugs? And he told people frankly what he thought about drugs, and then he was no longer drug czar. So I don't think it's just nurses that get this, but I do think it's a sign of that someone can be proud of, really, when they've said what needed to be said, regardless of the consequences. And I think that's something for us all to aspire to, not to be imminently silenced, but to say what we really think.
Yeah.
And who was number one then on the this
on the YouTube list? Number one was An Evening with Professor Mark Radford, and that was episode 32. I think that was last January. So he's had a lot of time to build up his following over that year, watching wise. But And like I was saying earlier, obviously we invited him on at the time when so much was happening, so much uncertainty, so much concern and confusion about the issues for student nurses. And I think that, I think he and colleagues did the best really to get to be accessible, to invite people to question and challenge, the decisions that were being made at the time, and kind of, sat in front of people and, answered questions. And I think, that episode was a really good example of that. And I suppose that, looking at what's happened, but still feeling in a relatively similar position now this year with Omicron and the huge pressures that the NHS is, under today, still those decisions are being made. I know it is interesting looking at some of the reports over the last few days about, the kind of desire to bring in other people to provide nursing care, as if anyone can kind of rock up to a healthcare establishment, put on a uniform, put on some scrubs and become a nurse. Perhaps really shows the kind of the lack of understanding of the kind of the critical nature of nursing, the important part that it plays, and the complexity of being a good nurse. And I think having said that, Mark really kind of is really good at articulating that importance and that level of work that nurses do, not just through his role at Health Education or NHS England, but also the work that he does in, research. And I think, again, we've had some really good research nurses on the podcast this year, haven't we? Some really kind of, people doing, really important work, but also kind of talking about research in a way that hopefully engages people that don't kind of think that research is of something that would interest them. So hopefully we've kind of played a bit of a part in, making people think again, whether it's students or, relatively newly qualified or nurses that have been around for a good few years, actually thinking more about the research nature of nursing and how they can get involved in it and play a part in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're saying that it was different across different platforms?
Yeah. So it's really interesting that I think one of the ones that is kind of repeated across is the popularity of the health and sustainability episode. I think that, comes relatively high on a few of them. The other top tracks that I looked at and that's obviously from our podcast element of MHTV. People can listen to that from a host of podcast services if they just search for MH Pod. The most popular episode. Oh, sorry, I'm doing in reverse order, aren't I? The top five. Number 5 was becoming a university student. So that was episode 62. So I think that was a couple of your colleagues, wasn't it, Nicky, that we invited onto the show?
And I think it's I just have a quick shout out to the students who have been piling through this pandemic and done such amazing work. If you think about the experience of the people who are now in the 3rd year and about to qualify in this coming September, this is all they've known. And that, when you think about that, you can see how amazing their progress has been and how impressive they've been, to be honest. The minute they came in, I think they only had like 4 or 5 months before things started to get rocky, and they were just getting out into practice when placements were changed, people were in, people were out, lessons went online. And so their experience of what they had hoped for university, as it was for all university students, has been really, really disrupted. But on top of that, they've had to pay for it. Don't even get me started on that, people. And they've risked their lives, and I think that's amazing. You look at them and I think a lot of fellow nurses will look at this new generation coming through and just be really proud of them, because this has not been easy. So I think, becoming a university student is a really valuable one. I'm really glad that they took time out to do that, because it is a bit different than the way it used to be. And one thing's for sure, it will never go back to the way that it was. Whether we stay online, how placements change, all that stuff's up for grabs still. But certainly the experience of going away to university is different now and is unlikely to go back exactly the way that it used to be. Yeah. What was the next one?
So fourth on SoundCloud was episode 69, and that was sickle cell, the invisible disability, as real as the oxygen you breathe.
Yeah, she did a great job there. So thanks again to shout out. Much appreciated your time and openness and honesty with that one.
Yeah. Then the third most popular, it was that health and sustainability episode that we've already talked about.
We need to get more. Yes. Yeah, so if you know anybody who's working in that sector, and you know that they would like to speak to us, or they'd like to have an episode, or you'd like to just hear more, let us know either on Twitter or on Facebook, and we will certainly ask more guests and develop that area of interest.
And then second was that evening with Professor Dame Elizabeth Anionwu. And then first was diversity and cultural awareness in nursing practice.
Yeah. Can you remind me who the guests were for that?
Oh, let's have a look. Yes, it's always dangerous to ask a question.
I feel that. As soon as I said it, I thought that was mean.
It was mean.
We did hair racism this year as well, which I thought was a really important one as well. That was this year, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. But the episode with diversity and cultural awareness, that was with Beverly Braithwaite.
Beverly Braithwaite, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think those two things were really exciting, because often it's only when you actually bring those conversations out into the open that you can actually just honestly say what's there. You can't change things until you honestly face them. And I think that there's still been this hesitancy in nursing to do what's right around social justice when it's impacting racism. And we're talking about, either systemic racism or individual nurses being held back and being mistreated because of their culture or the colour of their skin. And I think it's so important that nurses stand up and say, you cannot be a nurse and be racist. You can't. There are things that you cannot do, and that's one of them. And I think it's really exciting to see that being considered as part of health and well-being, because of course it impacts the care you get, impacts the care that you're able to give. So I was really excited and pleased to see us talking about that so openly and having kind of generous conversations with each other about that as well. Because it's an area, isn't it, that whenever you go onto any kind of public space and you talk openly about difficult issues, there's always that worry that you're going to say the wrong thing, or someone's going to jump down your throat, or a big misunderstanding is going to occur. But unless people do have good faith discussions, you're always going to miss out, aren't you, on a full range of understanding and being able to be empathetic to each other and being able to be better at our jobs. So for me, I found those quite exciting. What did you guys think?
I think that was an episode that I wasn't involved in, Nicky, while I was off, so I can't really comment on it. But I do think that generally we need to have more discussions about cultural diversity, and obviously make sure that we're representative on the panel as well of discussions. And I think I'd like to see more sort of intersectional discussions on cultural diversity, really, because I think that one thing we don't talk about is class. And, I think, that's certainly something that people are, discriminated against for still. Obviously, poverty and other forms of inequality, LGBT issues. I think, we need to kind of not just look at race on its own, but kind of look at all the different levels and layers of, discrimination and oppression that people experience. And, we said earlier, didn't we, that a lot of nurses won't speak out, and for me, that's evidence that we've still got some oppressive practice within the system that prevents people from having a voice and speaking up. So, if that's in the system when we're speaking up about professional issues, then even more difficult to speak up about issues that kind of impact on you as a person and a human being, So another reason why, we need white allies and why we need to have these conversations, so we kind of bring it out into the open, because a lot of people, with privilege don't even realise that these issues exist, particularly, when it comes to sort of system racism and sort of system discrimination. People get the kind of overt racism that people say, or, if people are, attacked for the colour of the skin, but then, well-meaning people in our system are racist through their kind of endorsement of systems or through not speaking out about things. So I think we need to have more open and honest conversations about that stuff. And I think we all need to be involved in that as well, regardless. So although I wasn't involved in that particular episode, I think, it's something that I totally advocate for, and think that we need to be thinking about having more of those discussions in the year ahead. So I think, as you said earlier, if people are listening and, you want to join us and you've got something to say, then, we welcome you on. Everybody's welcome onto the show. So, get in touch with us.
Nicky, I don't know. I'm trying to remember. Was Beverly's episode? I think it was probably one of the ones where we had the most audience participation. Was it? I'm just trying to remember. I think there was quite a lot of kind of not only kind of exploratory questions, but also was it the one where we had quite a bit of challenge from a few people about their sort of thinking? And if I've got it right, I think Beverly was just so good at kind of taking that challenge and kind of answering the criticism and kind of talking about it really well. And I suppose sometimes it can be really difficult, can't it, when you're operating over Zoom, not just the kind of the few seconds delay or the breakdown in the audio, but also that kind of being unable to pick up on the kind of the non-verbals and kind of it's always easier, isn't it, when you're in the room with someone. But I think, again, I think Beverly and lots of our guests this year have just done so well with the medium, haven't they, and just cope really, really well with it. Probably much better than I have at times. So, it's been good to see that.
Yeah.
I think as well, that's important to say that if people are interested in getting involved, but, don't feel that they've got the confidence, then, get in touch with us and, we'll happily, talk you through it. And equally, if you'd rather write something, we're always looking, aren't we, for article contributions for Mental Health Nursing Journal. So there's different ways that you can get involved and have a voice.
I think there's not been any comments particularly from the audience, but there's a few people wishing us Happy New Year. So Happy New Year back to you guys.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, it is. I quite enjoy that side of it, the kind of conversation side of it.
I do too.
And it's nice, isn't it, as well? I suppose there's the two nice bits. One is when you've got the kind of repeat offenders that come back every week, and you kind of get to know them.
You know who you are.
Yes, definitely. But then it's also that kind of little bit of a thrill when you see someone post for the first time that you don't recognise that name. And it is really nice, isn't it, to kind of know that there are people out there that are listening, that are interested in the conversations that we're having, and whether it is via Facebook or YouTube or via the pod, it's really nice that we've had that engagement. Just in terms of the pod sort of downloads, when I was looking at the stats a few weeks ago, we were well over 15,000 sort of people have listened to an episode that we've done of MHTV so far. And compared with some of the podcasts out there, that's probably quite sort of tiny, but I think that's a really good kind of testament to the work that that we've done. And I think the effort that especially Nicky's put into booking some really excellent guests, that we've been able to kind of profile and talk to over the last sort of 74 episodes. It's been amazing, really, hasn't it?
Definitely. So who was top of the pops on Facebook then?
So Facebook, that's a much harder sort of system, as I understand it, to work out the kind of the ranking. But from a look of all the episodes from last year, I think that the people that came out top was Mike Ramsey and Grant King. And they did an episode on empathy as an intervention, key values and qualities in mental health nursing. So that was the most popular one on Facebook. Have you got any memories from that one?
I think what's interesting for me about that is that was the most popular on Facebook, and I would hazard to guess that that's contributions as well from people that maybe aren't part of the healthcare community and might say something about kind of what people value, which is, around empathy when people are looking towards nurses and healthcare professionals. Because I do know that, from my own community outside of healthcare, people who've engaged in some of our conversations. So, it is an open public platform. So I wonder if that does reflect participation from kind of a wider audience who can kind of connect with the issue of empathy, whereas maybe some of the other things that we've talked about kind of represent the professional community more. I might be totally wrong, but that's what springs to mind.
Yeah, it's an area I'd like to look at more as well, I think, this year coming up. So although there's non-medical approaches to sort of being mentally healthy, we did a lot of work around looking at trauma, grief, things I think that are part of the kind of human condition and part of it's really important for nurses to have a really solid emotional understanding of what it means to be a person, but also being able to think about ways in which you can support people and tools and techniques and things that are specifically mental health focused. I think, but I don't want to bang on too much about education, but the current curriculum that's come through is very task orientated. And that's great. It's really important that we look after people's physical well-being. But I do worry that the kind of culturally speaking, we're losing a little bit of our mental health specialty around supporting emotional well-being and that kind of a more holistic management of being mentally healthy in a non-medical way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think that's reflected in some of the things like the nursing associate programs, some of my concerns around the fact that it's very adult nursing focused. And I know when I've kind of said that, people come back to me and say, well, I'm doing it and I want to do mental health nursing and I love doing the physical health skills part of it. And I'm not denying that it is important that as mental health nurses that we understand physical health and that we've got skills in that. But you wouldn't get an adult nurse saying, I don't do much adult nursing on my course, but it's really important that I learn about mental health, would you? So whilst I think that we need mental health nurses with physical health skills, we also need adult nurses with mental health skills. And if we're going to be kind of skilling people up through a nursing associate route, particularly going back to our issue around sort of class and people having access to, higher education, then if people wanting to do mental health, then I think we need to recognise that as a specialism and it needs to be built into the programme because, we know that mental health nurses numbers are dwindling and, we need to have some creative solutions in the future to kind of how we retain the workforce that we need to provide sort of safe quality care. And we're not going to be able to do that if we don't recognise that through the training people do and the routes that they can follow into mental health nursing for those that want to do mental health nursing and not adult nursing. So I'd like to see us have more conversations in the next year really about the nursing workforce and as well and the kind of future of that and try and think collectively as a community about what we can do. I'm quite interested in us talking about the the new community model framework and how that's going to impact, especially in terms of CPA disappearing and things like that. So yeah,
absolutely. I guess we're coming up to 40 minutes now, so we need to start finishing up. Should we pop round us in a circle and just have any last thoughts anyone wants to share? Dave,
yeah.
Something for you?
You're coming to me first. Hello. So my sort of thought from last year with MHTV, the first main one is we were robbed. Obviously, we had the opportunity to win an award and we didn't win it, which was obviously slightly distressing at the time. Hopefully, we've kind of got over it now. But I think, it was really nice to have...
Interesting use of the word we. Hoping we get over it, Dave.
Yeah, hopefully. And I think it was really nice, wasn't it, that we were kind of recognised for the work that we did with MHTV. And I know we've had a few conversations since it started, really, about how long it will go on for. I think the problem that I often face is that you kind of think, oh, we'll at least carry on a little bit longer, and then you go and book a load of really great guests. So you kind of think, well, I'm not going to cancel it before, we have those people on. And I think, again, we've got a few really good episodes sort of booked in already for this year. Just two to highlight. Obviously, we've got next week, Professor Marion Lynch. She's going to be talking about the I'm Fine art project. So again, kind of fitting in with that stuff we were saying earlier about art and mental health. And, we've already done quite a few episodes about that, including the one that Vanessa led on just before Christmas with colleagues in India. And then the other one that I've absolutely been kind of wanting to get a conversation about since way before MHTV started is the issue of body-worn cameras in mental health. And that's something that we're going to be talking about at the end of January with colleagues from King's, but also with some people that use services and their kind of views of professionals wearing body-worn cameras. So I think we've got some really kind of important meaty topics coming up. But I think the other reflection that I would want to share is, whilst at times kind of thinking, Wednesday afternoon's coming and I've got to get everything done for the episode that evening, the kind of 4 or 5 hours that go into each kind of episode production, it kind of really sort of pales into insignificance when you've just had a really good conversation for 45, 50 minutes. And you kind of think, actually, that's been one of the highlights of the week professionally in terms of that conversation that we've had. And I think, the final thing for me is that whilst the professional bit's true, it's always nice seeing, you, Nicky, you, Vanessa, once a week and just kind of catching up and saying, how's life treated you this week? And in the world of lack of kind of contact work-wise with people face to face in my Unite role, not so much in my vaccination role, but it's just really nice to spend that little bit of time, and sometimes to talk about work, sometimes to talk about not work, sometimes to talk about the cinema. It's just nice to do that, isn't it? So my final thought really much is, you really contributed to 2021 for me for MHTV. So thanks to both of you.
That's the first nice thing you've ever said. I hope we recorded this.
Yeah.
Vanessa, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, I don't know how I can really add to what Dave's just said, really. But I guess similar, like certainly for me at times last year, it was a struggle to get to, every single episode because, it is a kind of big personal commitment on top of kind of other personal and professional commitments. And, this is something that, we do in our own time, and, that the guests who come on mostly do in their own time, we need to acknowledge that. But at the same time, as Dave just said, investing in that time never feels like wasted time. I mean, I was absolutely exhausted before I started tonight, and now I feel full of energy again. And I think that is something that I find with these conversations. They are actually quite energizing. And for me, like Dave said, just having consistency of seeing you both has been really nice throughout the last year. So yeah, I think it's been good, and looking forward to the future episodes and what we get up to this year, really.
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely what I would like to say as well, with this idea that, we started off doing something that we didn't think would last very long. And what I really value about it is the community with us lot and with people who watch and join in and contribute by coming on or comment or forward and retweet stuff. And that's something that is being co-produced, doesn't it? No one person owns any of it. It's all been shared. It's all been done for free. And I think it's a really lovely model to see thrive. It's really positive. So I guess that just remains for us to say thank you very much to people who've watched and who will continue to watch. And do let us know if you have any suggestions for guests or topics. We always want to hear from you. And for those people who wished us Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you too. Take care, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
See you next week.
Bye.